So you have a itinerary and you love overlanding. You have plans to do it big on the trails and some super glamping. One ideas, tip, news and reviews, a podcast the first rate and here just for you. You don't have to think about it, join us and be about it. Something interesting we want to hear about it, come on let's talk about it. Welcome to Waypoint Overland's Random Waypoints Podcast.
Sponsored by Midland, communication for every adventure, the industry leader in radio communication technology and innovation for over 50 years. Sponsored by My Medic. Sponsored by Tembo Tusk. Sponsored by Shower Pouch. Sponsored by DeMoss Collective, mission built and made for mobility. Sponsored by Brew Trek. Sponsored by Hard Impact Designs.
Always remember, the opinion you follow should be your own. Just consider the things stated here to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online.
Hey guys, we have a special guest on the podcast this week. He's been called the modern-day Indiana Jones. Byron Bass is the Archaeology Senior Editor for the Overland Journal and Expedition Portal. After earning a Ph.D. in Archaeology and enduring years in the corporate archaeological and cultural resource management trenches, Bryon started a consulting company. Work through the decades has led him to Africa, the Middle East, Europe, South Pacific, and the Americas. In this profession, overland travel frequently presents as a vocational necessity rather than a purely adventurous pursuit. Bryon remains an avid photographer, EMT, and a certified public safety off-pavement vehicle operations instructor. Admittedly, certain past endeavors like flying single-engine planes or skydiving have become distant memories. He appreciates driving around the greater Santa Barbara area in a 1978 Toyota BJ40, tinkering on vintage motorcycles and producing small lots of red wine. Bass occasionally conducts specialized safety courses for workforce deployed to adverse locations, is on a search and rescue team, and serves in a law enforcement diving unit. Bryon, a very warm welcome to the show.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks, Phil. Phil and I have been going back for a while about scheduling this, and we finally pulled it off, and hopefully this will be the first of many podcasts with you guys.
Outstanding. You were on my bucket list, and I'm glad to have you. So let's get started, man. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, the first thing, tell our audience where you were born and raised.
That's always a good question. I like putting it on those visa forms, that you have to fill out. I was born in Inglewood, California, not far from the Fabulous Forum, the original Fabulous Forum where the Lakers played, and the LA Kings at the time. And I was raised in Culver City, which is immediately adjacent to Inglewood. I think that hospital has since closed down. And I think the property was developed, at least that's what I heard. But I grew up in Culver City, kind of in that down in by Marina Del Rey, Playa Del Rey area. At the time, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't developed. You wouldn't recognize it now, but we had, I don't know how many thousands of acres right across the street from us. When I was a kid, it was BMX bike heaven. We had horse stables, a go-kart track. I mean, now it's all developed, but I guess I was kind of on the tail end of the inner, let's say, LA County development that was happening kind of in the 70s and early 80s. Anyway, that's where I grew up, and that's my profile. I'm sticking to it.
So did you grow up off-roading or overlanding, camping, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we used to go camping quite a bit with my dad, but he had like an old 40 Econoline 150. I mean, that was how we rolled, and a lot of it was more like going to campgrounds, kind of camping, or going along a like the fire trails, or we went to the Mojave a bunch of times with him, where, obviously in the right time of the year, you can drive way out there just with two-wheel drive. It's not a big deal. And we also grew up riding mini bikes and stuff like that. So it wasn't uncommon when we got a little bit older to go out with our dad and camp, and then have a couple motorcycles in his van. And those were the days that was all pre-rooftop tenting and I guess, well, maybe Sportsmobile was already making a pop top, but that was like sleeping on the ground and staring at the stars kind of camping.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that was pretty much it. I also did go to, when I got a little bit older, some summer camps where they had overnight trips and stuff like that. And yeah, I always liked that. Those are some of my best memories as a kid, is the summertime camping trips, for sure.
So what kind of vehicle do you travel in? I actually know, but for our audience, what
Well, I have this I have a couple of vehicles, actually. That's such a first world thing to say. I have a Toyota Tacoma that I could say still is my daily runner. If I just have to go visit a client or a project that's pretty close to home, and I don't need a lot of my gear, I might just run out with that Tacoma. It's kind of nearing the end of its engine work life. It's got like 318,000 miles on it. I bought it new. It's a 2003 Tacoma. It's not other than some minor mods, bumpers and stuff like that, and some off-road lights and a winch. It's pretty stock. I mean, under the hood, it's everything stock. I didn't do anything there, and I still use that. I think the motor is getting a little bit tired, and I'm afraid to cross that bridge. I know it's coming soon, and I'll have to make the call about what I do with that vehicle. But it's Toyota. It's running fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I have people ask me about it all the time, not really to buy it, but just about it. And then I have, as you know, Phil, I have that Ford E350 van that I bought. Well, I bought the van new in 2010. It came from Ford. I purchased it through a dealership kind of up by where Sportsmobile used to be, up in kind of in the northern central California area by Fresno, and then had Sportsmobile do the drivetrain conversion and the pop top. And then that was pretty much about it. I drove it around. It looked like a bread delivery truck for, I don't know, like a year and a half. I mean, it had nothing in it. It had two front seats and it was just empty. A lot of these descriptions came from my mom. She looked in and she's like, looks like you should be dropping off the bread from the bakery or something like that. And then I don't know how, but I found Mario and the crew over at what used to be Adventure Trailers. Now they're AT Overland. And we talked about doing a kind of an interesting build out so that I could use it for work and still use it for camping and family stuff too when the opportunity arose. And so that's the vehicle that I kind of drive around with. I think it's got like 85,000 miles, something like that on it. It sees a lot of like weekly use, but I'll only log up a few hundred miles per week on it, and then I'll go on a trip, maybe a couple thousand miles. Then it just kind of gets the 100 miles here and there to clients and projects. But it's pretty cool. The descriptor that my mother gave was that it looks like it's a cargo plane on the inside, with all the L track. And I even have some old Huey helicopter seats. I think you have a little clip that you put on your Instagram with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, cargo plane comfortable is what that rig is. It's fun. It's got that pop top. Sometimes if it's just me, I'll just sleep, kind of without doing the top down below. It just depends if I'm taking the family out or not, and where we are and what we're doing. But it's a fun rig for sure. Definitely.
So what made you make that choice? What compelled you to choose that particular rig? There's so many choices.
Yeah, at the time there weren't. Going into, let's say, the early 2000s, it was really build out something like the Tacoma I mean, things have changed here in North America specifically so much in the last, let's say, decade and a half as far as what's available out there. People were building out sprinter vans, but I remember at the time, Sportsmobile had done a conversion. I want to say they purchased the parts. They had this red Sprinter, Mercedes Sprinter, up at the shop, and they had purchased the parts and kind of done the conversion in-house to four-wheel drive. And in Europe, I believe you could at the time already get an all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive kind of setup from Mercedes, but we didn't have that here. And so the van was really, that was kind of what was available, what was an option. I preferred to have like an open interior where, let's say it's snowing, you just kind of move out of your seat and go right to the back. You don't have to get out and go around. It was just my preference. It wasn't like I have a problem with, going out of a door and climbing in to a camper or the rig that's built on the back. But I kind of thought that would be a pretty cool way to go. And so that's really how it came about. And then, Sportsmobile, they still, well, now it's called Field Van with Jonathan there at the helm, but they have that pop top, and that it's really cool. It's a cool build. It's pretty well thought out, just like anything custom. There's always a little bit of tinkering that I need to do on it, but it's not really like design flaws. It's just more like personalizing it. I still do that to this day. But anyway, that was kind of the process.
The way you have it set up is extremely well thought out.
Yeah,
I really like the way it's set up.
Yeah, we used a lot of painter's tape. I can't remember if Mario came up with that or not, from AT Overland, but I kind of taped out where things could go if they were going to be built in, and made sure that taped out, what I mean is on the ground. So, the floor of the van, so that, for example, you could still pass by if we put in like a third passenger seat, or if we put a little mini sink somewhere or fridge, that you could still walk around and do stuff. And that was actually kind of key to the build and how, you see it when I'm at one of those expos or something like this at work,
So were there any hurdles for you to overcome for you to travel this way besides just obtaining the vehicle? Were there any other obstacles to get you out there? Well, before we go to that,
Yeah.
what inspired you to get these vehicles? Were they out of necessity? What was the impetus behind these getting
You asked the good questions, Phil. I like that. I mean, there's that need versus want aspect to it. I mean, as a professional archaeologist, I could say that when I worked for this large engineering company, international engineering and environmental consulting company, we got by on a lot of projects just renting Crown Vics, because it would be like a field survey, let's say next to the highway, or at the junction where they're going to put a roundabout, or we could park on a road and then do the 20 miles of linear survey for a gas pipeline or something like that. And so, we're able to get by doing stuff like that, but inevitably, you're going to need some sort of four-wheel drive vehicle to access the locations that aren't by the side of the road. And when I started to think about going out on my own, really, it's kind of I don't know, it's a long story, but I ended up getting the 2003 Tacoma because one, the Land Cruisers were just a little bit more expensive at the time, and I had a Land Cruiser prior to that before moving overseas. But in any case, I just wanted a super capable vehicle that I didn't have to modify if I didn't want to, that could do everything. The Tacoma that I picked up, it came with a rear locker, which really I almost never use. I mean, it's just such a reliable vehicle. So that was really the thinking behind it. It was, I guess you could say it was a necessity that for vocation, but also I like it, for example, going skiing or doing some winter activities, you just go. You don't, if it says chains required, you just wave and put it in four-wheel drive and just kind of drive on past and give a thumbs up. And That's cool if you're doing that a couple times a year minimum, you know, and rather than having like a let's say a more civilian car. Um, but anyway, that was kind of the thinking that went into getting that Tacoma. Um,
You chose a career that there are not many people in. You're a rarity in that
yeah.
way. So my question is, how did you become an archaeologist? Was this a childhood dream? Was this a evolution? How did
Yeah,
you become an
it's certainly an
archaeologist?
evolution. I didn't, you know, like a lot of kids, when I was when it came along, I certainly watched Indiana Jones. But I didn't really think about archaeology. I think I mentioned to you, you know, in on the phone, that I was studying political science when I went off to college, and I was in the late '80s, I should say, and I had a different worldview, a different idea of what I wanted to do, and then it came up that I needed to take another class in the social science department, and and the only one I could get into, there was like some sociology and psychology. I can't remember. None of them looked cool. And there was anthropology 101. And I didn't have to crash the class. I could come in and just fill out the form and take the class. And it was really just because I needed to have a tick box for poli sci. So I took that first class. It was like I think it was intro to anthropology. And so of course they're going to talk about archaeology and physical anthropology and linguistics and and even, you know, that teacher who taught that class was into forensics as well. And so I don't know. I didn't do a lot of studying, and I got an A on the first exam. And I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. You know, maybe the cool part was that I didn't have to study rather than,
Oh,
but I never ditched a class. You know, I went to a state college where you could, you know, balance your schedule pretty easily. So I kind of did the learn and burn for like Monday through Thursday morning. And then I kind of had a long weekend. I was able to do that for a couple of years. But anyway, that's kind of how I got into anthro. And then I took like intro to archaeology. I think that was the second class I took. And then I kind of thought, okay, I'll still major in poli sci and I'll minor in anthropology. And making a long story short, over a period of time, I got sort of to the end of everything and realized that I was going to graduate with a degree in anthropology with the emphasis as archaeology. And I don't know, maybe if I went back to San Diego State, I think there was a final exam and a written essay or something, and I could maybe get my master's, my undergrad degree in that. But I didn't worry about that anymore. I just kind of put my head down and went straight on. And I had the good fortune of getting asked by one of the professors in the department to join him on his project in Jordan. And this was in 1987. And I hadn't, other than like, I don't know, like my mom taking us down to Mexico for vacations with friends or something like that. Our vacations were sort of, I don't know, like going up to Big Sur and kind of car camping or going out to the Des with my dad, you know, that kind of stuff. And so I thought it would be cool to go check out archaeology somewhere else. I hadn't put it all together that this is what you do. And then I was hooked. I mean, I was hooked from the minute I got on the airplane to fly to Jordan, and there was no looking back really after that. And yeah, so that was cool. And at San Diego State, we had the good fortune of there was like a required field course. I want to say it was Saturday mornings, sort of from 8 until 1, and it was excavating at the Presidio down there in San Diego. And it's just a really cool place to have. I guess it was really like your lab class, and we had the grad students kind of overseeing us. And because we were excavating not only Spanish, like colonial period Spanish artifacts, but also Native American artifacts in the same context. It was really good training for working with prehistoric materials and historic colonial materials. And all this kind of happened when I was still an undergrad. And so that's kind of what happened, Phil. I was just minding my own business. And
so you did all of your education in Santa Barbara? I mean, in California?
Well, I did my undergrad at San Diego State, and I actually started grad school there too. And at the time, I was working on a marine archaeology project off La Jolla shores, doing some diving and a little experiment to see how stone artifacts would transport with not only with daily tides, but also with storm sequences and stuff like this. And so one of my professors thought that it might be wise for me to make sure that I had a foot in a different camp. And I wanted to continue on with coastal marine prehistory. So he set me up with some colleagues of his who were working in, it was then Yugoslavia. It was before the Civil War, in the early and mid 90s had started there. And so I made contact with them, and really I just wanted to kind of join along just as another student learning over on the Croatian coast, the Yugoslav coast at the time. And keeping the story short, I decided that it would be better to transfer to the University of Edinburgh and just focus on working on this island off the coast of Croatia that I had visited with a couple of other archaeologists, and they sort of said, hey, you could do what you want, academically speaking, obviously. And so the University of Edinburgh, my supervisor there, who was the head of the department at the time, I put together like a research program, and they assigned me another two. I had two supervisors just to keep me in line. Maybe that was when I suggested that I was going to be riding down there every summer on my R100 GS. And they were like, wait a second here. We need to have our eyes on this guy. But it was a pretty rigorous program for sure. I had to catch up on a lot of archaeology, European archaeology, Greco-Roman archaeology that I had no background in at all. And they let me audit the courses at the university. So that was really cool, without worrying about getting grades and having exams and stuff like that. And so there was a lot of learning and catching up on my own. And that's kind of what happened. So I did my undergrad basically at San Diego State, and my grad school, getting my Ph.D., was over in Scotland at the University of Edinburgh.
Tell me, did attending college in the UK, did it have any effect on you in any way? Did it affect you in any way significantly going to school overseas in the UK?
That's a good question, Phil. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like silly things like paying bills in another country. Really, and being, I was a student, but still responsible for stuff. I remember that the first flat that I was renting, it wasn't really that expensive, and some guys showed up one day and they wanted me to pay the poll tax. And I think they've since gotten rid of this, but I can't even vote over there. I'm not a citizen. I had a student visa. I think it allowed me like 20 hours a week or something like that, so I could work at the university. But in any case, I told them I'm not paying the tax. I can't even vote. And so they left and came back a few months later and said, you're one of the few guys in the neighborhood who hasn't paid the poll tax. And then all of a sudden it popped into my head like that Schoolhouse Rock stuff, where I said, hey, you guys, no taxation without representation. I can't even, if I pay it, I can't vote. And so ultimately, I think they got the land, the property owner to pay this tax. But yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I grew up in SoCal, and being in Scotland, as you can guess, there's a lot of weather there. Gets wet and rainy and cold. At first, it was just cool. I could wear sweaters and hats and stuff like that. It took a little getting used to. I mean, I have to say the one thing that I found difficult, I didn't find any of the life really difficult there, even as a starving student, except for in the winter, the lack of daylight. That was really hard for me to wrap my head around. I would walk over to the office, the grad student office, and it would be, let's say, like 8:30 in the morning, and it would still be dark outside. And if I didn't go out at lunchtime to go work out or go get a sandwich or something, if I didn't leave the department, like, and physically go outside, like 3:45, 4 in the afternoon, it would be dark again, like pitch black. And that was difficult. That I had to kind of think about about my approach in the wintertime there, just so I wouldn't go nuts. But otherwise, it was a good experience. It was a really good experience. I had a great time there, made some great lifelong friends, and learned a lot. They have a different approach to academia over there, and I appreciated that too. They have a lot of, we're not going to hold your hand. You got to get up to speed on your own, and be an expert in your field, and that's how we're going to give you your degree. And anyway, so yeah.
Your story hasn't been completely written yet, but could you give us a few highlights of your life being an explorer, traveler, and archaeologist so far?
Yeah. I think that if I had to talk about some of the highlights, it's almost I almost feel hypocritical, because some of the highlights as far as on the professional side happened when I was working for this international engineering company, because they kind of sent me all over the place. I wasn't always just me. Sometimes we would go out with another archaeologist, or two or three or five. Sometimes it was just myself and a biologist or a water quality specialist. But I had a chance to go to various locations in the South Pacific and Polynesia and Micronesia, Africa, all sorts of places in the Western US that you would never think that you would visit, working on projects. And it just let me see a lot of the world that I might not have had access to otherwise, because I was being sent there to work, especially some places in the South Pacific. And also places here in California, where they weren't little towns where I would go and stop and hang out at the one motel in town and eat at the one restaurant in that town. But it was really interesting to see that. I'm into photography, and that was kind of cool. But I think those are some of the highlights, working in Micronesia, working in Polynesia, working with local people, from sort of like my equivalent on some of these atolls and islands down in the South Pacific, and just getting into the culture, getting into the food, the background. A lot of the times it wasn't really archaeology. It was more interviewing an elder in a village and finding out, if they're okay, if the company that I'm representing, or part of the project that I'm representing, is putting let's say a cell phone tower on a hilltop. And do they have any folklore about that hilltop? And are they okay with something going there? If they have any other ideas, can we put them out there so we can, kind of work with them? And, there was a lot of chewing beetle nut and going out and drinking kava and all sorts of things with, members of the Micronesian Supreme Court. Just bizarre things that happen when you're out there kind of representing. So those are some of my best memories. And of course, obviously living in Europe, working in Switzerland, surveying in the Swiss Alps. I mean, it never stops. Still waiting for them to just call me up and invite me as just another digger on the project, to swing a pick or a shovel and have a good time. But those are some of my highlights, professionally. But one of the things, that people don't mention when you're an archaeologist is like, doing the research. I mean, I would say that 60, maybe 75% of the time, it's not out in the field. It's in library, in some archive somewhere, looking up old maps, comparing one map to another, trying to figure out what was the old route for this stagecoach or that Native American group, or, comparing like a dotted line on one map with what became like a single track road on another, and is it the same route? And tracking down things on old maps in the Middle East and in Europe and stuff like that. And there's a lot of that goes on. A lot of standing in front of your computer, sitting in front of your screen, writing for technical studies and things like this. So that's also part of it. People don't tell you that part when you start studying archaeology, but it's definitely a necessity, that's for sure.
So at this stage in your life, would you say the archaeology inspires the travel, or does the travel inspire the archaeology?
That's a good question, Phil. I think the archaeology has been the mechanism that has allowed me, the vessel that has allowed me to have a reason to go to a lot of these places. It's sort of the excuse in a way. It's the excuse, to say, yeah, I'm gonna go work off an island off the coast of Croatia, or I'm gonna go work in the Swiss Alps. Like, who does that? But when, especially on the academic side of things, in academia, when you're just doing pure research, that's the reason you're going out to find late prehistoric routes over the Alps, trading routes, looking for evidence of travel and commerce before there was written. To understand, where we come from. Hopefully, at some point, we will realize that it can help direct us on where we're going. I don't see that happening, which is kind of sad. I don't see humans learning from the past that often, reflecting on things. Like, hey, we've been down this road before. Maybe this is not a good idea. It just misses me.
Sad but true. Sad but true.
Yeah, Michael, that is the case. That is the case.
Where would you like to go? Where would you like to go that you haven't been? Like, what's on?
Oh my God, there's so many places I haven't been. I mean, as you know, I just spent some weeks, in the front seats with Scott Brady in an Ineos Grenadier, and I always like talking to him about like crossing the Antarctic or driving Greenland or something. Like, I don't know, like if I just fly into Antarctica, touch the ground, have a beer, and then leave, I'll be good. I that's, my feet get cold. I'm not sure how I would address that. It would be nice to get down to Antarctica, but I still haven't. I've been to South America, and I've done some really cool stuff, especially in Peru. I've also been out to the Galapagos and limited parts of Ecuador. But I think it would be really cool to do sort of a circumnavigation. I know everyone's focusing on that now, but I'd like to see it too. And it would be kind of fun. Lately, I've been kind of scheming, doing stuff on a vintage motorcycle. One of the things that's still a dream, I spoke to this old Croatian guy at a cafe. I used to sit there and just listen to his stories. He had lived in New Zealand, and he had ridden an old BMW R69S, which also kind of became one of my grail bikes to buy. But he had ridden one around the North Island and South Island. He was working there, but he just kind of did it when he had time off. And then when I started diving into how cool would that be, that's pretty cool. I think it would be fun, just kind of on a vintage bike, just leaned out equipment, not relying on waterproof panniers and having to kind of wrench on it on occasion. It just makes you kind of earn it a little bit more.
We talk about that a lot. Sometimes simpler is more, well, it's definitely more adventurous, but it's also sometimes just gets you more in touch with the places that you go.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. I mean, I'm sure that you've done this too, but I've gone through, for example, my van and my Tacoma, and just weeded. I just look at something and go, okay, have you used that? And then I ask myself, do you have a reason to use it? Because I could see, like, I think you guys talked about or started to dive in on this in your last podcast, certain tools and stuff and spares. And I think, Michael, you mentioned, the big parts aren't usually the ones that break. It's the small little bits and pieces. And so I started to ask myself similar questions, a while back, and weed out things in my trucks that, for example, like carrying 2 spare tires. I don't know. I run tires at least on my Tacoma and on the van. Like, I could track them down surely within a week. Anywhere in Canada, in the US, Mexico. I know that I can do that. And then then you ask yourself, well, would that be a bummer to have downtime for a week while you're waiting for the AT4, cool Cooper or whatever it happens, to show up? No, like wherever I would be stuck if I, if my spare was, just destroyed and I had to get another tire. Well, it's just part of the adventure, I mean, obviously now, I can yell at the boss and complain because now I have my own company. I guess I would be the boss, but now, I can, if I have downtime, I can find something to do on my laptop. But yeah, I agree with you, Michael. Like less for me has become more. I don't try to these days, because I'm over the age of 23 now, and I don't try and sacrifice comfort. I always like sleeping is important, especially when you're not in your usual environment. And so I don't try and like recreate my home bed. But if I'm not sleeping, if I'm using like the coolest, insulated, inflatable, this and that, but I'm still like my hips poking into the underneath, or it's hurting my neck, then I got to come up with a solution, because that can only last for so long. I mean, as you probably know.
It's funny being a motorcycle person myself. I listen to you talk about, being on 2 wheels and whatnot. I told Phil the other week, if it was my choice, I would travel the world on a motorcycle for sure. It's just so much more fun. But it brings up a point that you just made. It's really tough to get something comfortable, and sleep is so important.
Yeah. I mean, it's for me, that's a priority for sure. Even if I'm on my bike, I definitely make sure that whatever I'm bringing along and I'm going to be sleeping on is going to be comfortable. If it's a little bit bigger and it ends up being like a larger, I like some of the Nemo products.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's bigger, if it's going to let me sleep fine, I'm all good with that. I think that, you got a point there, Michael, about the motorcycle travel, because I sort of my first adventure travel, I could say, was just riding kind of at the starting of every summer from Scotland down to Croatia to do my field work. And so over the years, I definitely left stuff behind in the museum that I was working out of down in Croatia. But on the whole, like, I really had to think about, like, okay, what am I taking on my bike? And I would leave Scotland, it must have been like my second or third year heading down. It was like towards mid-April, I think. And there was a snow flurry that morning. And then I'm on the phone with somebody down on this island, off Croatia, and they're like, oh yeah, it's 25 C already. Everyone's swimming in the ocean. And it's like, whoa, okay, so how am I packing for this? And it really makes you kind of refine your gear and your view of your gear. And I think that was sort of when I started to weed out like super casual t-shirts that I would only wear like in very, very, very casual settings or on wrenching on the bike. So I started like stuff like this, like where, I could wrench on a bike, but I could also, somebody said, hey, let's go to dinner with the head of the department. I could show up, and the waffle pattern, this, and, it doesn't have a lot of stuff on it. And so that was one of the things. And of course, obviously cooking equipment, things like that, as you just kind of slim it all down, and everything gets scrutinized as far as motorcycle travel, putting it in your bags and stuff like that. And I think that's helped out my vehicle travel too. And just my general overland and international travel. I mean, I go through my stuff and then I go, wait a second. Okay, you're going to have access to washer and dryer. So you don't need that many shirts,
Right.
or you don't need that many socks, or
it's the theory that you're still on planet Earth. You're not going to Mars.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I find some of the hardest trips to pack for, especially with work, are like 1 week. Where maybe you can't guarantee access to washer and dryer, or you're going to be like, I don't know, like for work, let's say you're at a hotel, or where you can maybe have your laundry done, by a service or something like that while you're during the day when you're working. But by the time they get it back, you'll be getting ready to leave anyway. So then you got to kind of, then you're like, okay, so I got to bring like 6 pairs of underwear, and then I got to bring 6 shirts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I become a fan of washing things in the sinks. But yeah, anyway, we kind of sidetracked on that one, but
No, that was good. I love for the audience to hear real people that really go out here and do it and what their methods and methodology is. Uh, you mentioned
it's not a perfect science, right? I mean,
right.
it's a failing
No.
forward kind of perspective. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and as you know, I mean, what if the 3 of us were going someplace in the same vehicle and for the same amount of time, and we got our bags ready, and then we said, all right, let's put everything in each of our bags out so we can see it. I know that my packing would be different than yours, Michael, and definitely different than yours, Phil, and also be, for example, Phil's starting out in the Pacific Northwest, to go and get on a plane to meet us, somewhere. So he's thinking completely different than, me here in Central California with the sun and like palm trees at our local airport, et cetera, et cetera.
For sure.
You mentioned Scott Brady, and you just got back from Africa. What inspired your journey to Africa?
And for people listening, where in Africa, where did you guys transit through?
Well, Scott had transited from the Atlantic side of South Africa in an Ineos Grenadier, all the way through to, his goal was to get all the way through to above the Horn of Africa over by the Gulf of Aden, Red Sea area, and complete a transit of Africa from one side to the other, basically. And so, as Scott usually does, he schemes all sorts of things and then asks me to come along and ride shotgun and take over the driving when necessary. And so I joined Scott on the trip in northern Kenya. I flew into Nairobi, and then the next morning jumped on a little Cessna Caravan and flew up to northern Kenya. And Scott picked me up at this little dirt airstrip there in the Grenadier, and we stayed at a small little lodge there at Archer's Post. And then from there we drove all the way up to the border with Ethiopia, and we drove through Ethiopia and in through Djibouti. And once we got to the Gulf of Aden, to the ocean there, to the sea, that was Scott's destination. So that's kind of how it schemed it. And so we'd been talking for a while about different trips in Africa. One of them involved motorcycling from Cape Town up to Cairo. It's been done and it doesn't bother me. Like that would be really cool. So we had talked about different trips, and then also planning really cool go-sees along the way, archaeological sites, cultural heritage locations. I mean, I obviously, because of my background, I'm super interested in that, and I think it makes those kinds of trips that more meaningful, not just for me, but also my interaction with the people in the villages along the way. I mean, it's always the simple things. So let's say we're in a village and some kid's got a cut arm, and I can put some disinfectant on it and put a Band-Aid on it and get the thumbs up and help them out. That made the whole trip right there. One time Scott and I were driving in Uganda, and we gave this lady and her kids a ride to school, and it was sort of in passing. We had just stopped. I can't remember why. And this lady walked up and she said, "Hey, can you give my kids a ride to school? But I'll come along." And we said, "Sure." And of course, we were in a G-Wagon. We only had, well, we kind of had a seat in the back. It had, it was one of the end-decker G-Wagons, so it had been built out with a couple fridges and stuff. But two kids sat in the back, and then the mom sort of sat like kind of on one of my legs in the front. And then we started driving, and like we're 10 minutes down this road, this dirt road, and it wasn't hard going, but we're driving along, and Scott's like, well, how much farther? And I can't remember how many kilometers. It was like 15 kilometers for them. And she said, oh, they walk it pretty much daily to go to school. And it was just like, wow, like,
Yeah.
I think the kids got into, before we got there, we had some ice cream or something in one of the fridges that they got into, and I'm sure they had good stories along the way, but anyway, that's kind of how I ended up over there on this latest trip. And Scott and I, obviously, you have to get along with somebody when you're in that kind of proximity for days on end. We've definitely had a lot of adversity hit us on another trip in Africa, where you just have to be a cool customer and use your experience not only in the overland capacity but also just with fellow humans. Sometimes, as you guys know, you have to be comfortable with other people carrying firearms. You have to be comfortable with people sticking firearms, in your face or pointing them at you, and being able to de-escalate things if necessary. And that happens. I'm not trying to paint a bad picture about different places that I've traveled. I'm certainly not trying to paint a bad picture about places that I've traveled in Africa, but things come up. There are militias over there. There are, law enforcement where who are these guys driving up in a bunch of G-Wagons that are painted tan? Like what's that about? I get it. It's, or who are these guys, with aviator glasses driving along in this truck that we've never seen before? It's got this really cool, kind of British racing green color and a UK license plate, and they're driving on the wrong side of the road, with the right-hand drive, I mean, that comes up, and you just have to kind of assume that in certain places you're going to stick out. And so Scott and I get along. We've been in a lot of fun situations and a lot of hairy situations, and we trust each other at that level, to kind of be a cool thinker and just stay calm and get through it. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons why he asked me on some of these trips.
Yeah.
And this was a really cool trip. It was really interesting. Nothing went as we planned. Nothing went as we planned. We're going to be releasing some news releases and podcasts and stuff like that. And you'll definitely see some of that out there. But you'll be putting some of the imagery and some of the videos up on this one too. We had plans. Like, for example, crossing the border between Ethiopia and Djibouti. Scott had read a couple different places that it takes like 15 minutes. It was a couple of Germans, I think, in a Unimog or something like that. And they just said, yeah, we drove through that border and we flashed all the carnet was stamped and this and that, and boom. And we got to that border, and 3 days later, we were still at the border. Yeah, But anyway, Phil, that's how I got over on this latest adventure. And obviously, I do a lot of photography, and I came up with a short list of things that would be really cool for us to see in case, for example, we never get back over in that region of Africa, which included, of course, the National Museum in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Had to see some of the exhibits there, but we also hit a couple of cultural sites that were just really, really special, really unique, and so some of that that's kind of like my forte, I guess, is, trying to figure out, what's the cool stuff to check out.
Time to put Byron Bass on the spot.
Do it.
Do you like the Ineos Grenadier?
So I'll qualify that first. I own 2 Toyotas, and I'm a Land Cruiser guy. That's what I tell everybody. I feel like, even though I have a Tacoma, but I've driven a lot of stuff out there. Nissan Patrols, Pathfinders, Suzuki Jimneys, Suzuki Samurais that used to find around. I mean, you name it. 110 Land Rovers, 90s, Defender 90s, G-Wagons, and you know, kind of everything in between. So I'm coming from that perspective when I'm not a member of the press that's doing like a press launch or something of a vehicle. I've gone for certain things on assignment for the Overland Journal, but it's never been like a new vehicle or something like that. So that's not where I'm coming from, which maybe is refreshing. So I think it's a cool vehicle. I mean, you know, it's being made in 2024. Well, you know, 2023, 2024. You have to follow, depending on your market, and I think this is kind of overlooked in a lot of the chatter that's out there. But if you're going to make a new vehicle and you want to have marketplace, you know, have it appear in the marketplace, you're going to have things like ABS. You're going to have things like airbags. You're going to have certain features that are just required. Not because people demand it. It's like regulations. If you want to sell the same vehicle like in Europe and sell that same vehicle with only a few tweaks in North America, sell that same vehicle in certain parts of Africa, you're going to have places in the Middle East. You're going to have certain standards that are met for modern standards. Now, Toyota, because they have their foot in diverse, their feet, I should say, in diverse marketplaces, you know, they can have like some 70 series that's only intended for the African market, where the diesel engine isn't meeting European standards, and that's okay. I mean, it's okay in that marketplace. I mean, hopefully those marketplaces kind of clean up and dial in, you know, as far as helping out our planet stay clean. But so Ineos obviously had to take all of that into consideration when they came out with this solid front axle vehicle. The first thing that I think that comes to mind is the comfort of it. All I know is that we were on roads, the same route would go from really nice tarmac to just terrible pothole to dirt, back to tarmac, potholes, checkpoints with you know, bollards and things in the road, trenches, having to go around, you know, some construction. And all I know is at the end of the day, I would get out of the Grenadier and I wasn't sore. And that's pretty key. That's pretty important. I mean, yeah, I get it. I have a BJ40 that's a 1978 Canadian market BJ40. The seats suck, you know, and if I drive that vehicle all day, I'm going to be sore. It's just is what it is. So I like the fact that they approached, for example, the Recaro seats, that they had Recaro totally kind of neck them down, so to speak. They pared them down. There's no motor. There's no automated anything on the seats. It's all, you know, pull the lever and push the thing and pull the thing. And, you know, like when I would switch with Scott Brady in the driver's seat, you know, I would have to usually make a tweak or two and make it work for me. And I think that's cool. You know, they did that for various reasons. Obviously, it's making the seats cheaper on the retail side because they don't have all the electronics and everything going in there and the motor. But they're also making it so that you can adjust it any way you want. They're also making it so that if the vehicle is having like a water crossing and things start to get a little bit sticky and wet on the inside, that you're not going to flood out, you know, the motor on your seats and then have all sorts of other lights flashing on the screen and stuff like that. So I appreciate that. You know, this is as a 50-something-year-old guy, you know. And at the same time, the vehicle, it rides clean. It rides really well. When you slam the doors, it slams with authority. I had to climb under. We were looking for the engine block number when we crossed over from Kenya into Ethiopia. And so I had to climb under the truck and start looking around for different serial numbers and things like that. And this is after Scott had already driven it all the way pretty much across most of Africa. Wasn't a lick of oil underneath it. It wasn't weeping from anywhere. I mean, I had first up close and personal view of everything underneath that rig, you know, with the customs guys like standing over my feet while I was doing it. So I like that. I like that it has creature comforts just enough so that it makes my ride okay. I like that it has parts of it where I can build it out if I want to on my own. So so to answer your question, Phil, I think it's a cool rig. I think it's certainly a candidate for aiming at like the foresters and the NGOs, and even, you know, sort of light duty military capacity, if that's what they're going to be going for. You know, it has the space. Another thing that I liked on it, Scott had built it out down in South Africa with a platform that was kind of set up for two people, and it had two drawers, but you could sleep back there if you want. And we had to sleep back there when we were kind of stuck at the Djiboutian border. And all I know is I could sit up in the vehicle, read or check my phone or do whatever, and I was sitting up in it. Like I wasn't kind of, my head wasn't bumped you know, into the ceiling or anything like that. And we had ours set up, Scott set it up. We had 40 liters of fuel in 2 NATO cans on the roof. Had some giant loop bags up there for fuel, and a front runner box, and then also some Max Tracks were up there. So we definitely had stuff that was on the roof, and the vehicle was loaded down with stuff for 2 people that were traveling in Africa, on the whole, assuming that things weren't going to be resupplied at the next petrol station. So we had that thing pretty well set up, and as far as I know, it was everything, the shocks, everything was bone stock. And that's cool. I like that. So yeah, I hope that answers the question about the Grenadier.
So on the trip, were there any mechanical issues or anything like that?
Not when I was on the trip, and I don't think that Scott had any either. He might have had to I think he replaced the steering stabilizer, and as a matter of fact, I think he nailed it on something somewhere, but I wasn't on the trip at that time. But this is a part, you know, where you could just put it on yourself, which is also appreciated. But we had no warning lights at the end of the trip. We had no warning lights. Everything was fine.
Did you see any other ones out there?
No. As a matter of fact, I think it was, well, in Kenya there are some circulating around, and I think Scott, before I showed up, he went on a trip with a couple of people that have some Grenadiers. I think one of them was a diesel. We were in a petrol, you know, a gas powered one, using that 3-liter turbo motor, that Beamer motor. But when we crossed over into Ethiopia, it was surely the first one that crossed in, and same thing with Djibouti. We even had, you know, like customs people like, wow, that's cool. We weren't sure if we should say, well, they're going to be coming down the pike. I'm sure you're going to see plenty soon enough. But when we were in Djibouti, we coincidentally had to do kind of like a medical run of this former French Foreign Legionnaire who had kind of helped us out, brought us some food when we were stuck at the border. And when we finally got to his little encampment, he's got like an overlander encampment. He jumped off the front bumper of the Grenadier and broke his arm. And so we took him to a French Army hospital over in Djibouti City. And when we pulled up, it was just a coincidence, but a fellow from the company that is going to be representing the Grenadier when it comes up for sale in Djibouti was there. And he said, whoa, this is cool. I haven't actually seen one in person. So it's definitely a new vehicle, but I can see it slotting into certain marketplace pretty easily, especially in places like that, but also in places in North America too. You know, I could see that. It's a cool rig for sure.
You can give us a very unique perspective on this. I've been asking everybody who's traveling in Africa and the Middle East the same question, and it's what impact and or obstacles has politics and war had on your trip and on Africa itself?
Wow, that's a deep question, Phil. I might have to just skim the surface there and not dive in, you know, on any specific level, but Yeah, people, like I said earlier, people on our planet don't seem to, some people don't seem to look at the past and try and learn from that. And so I feel that when you want to travel, you kind of have to do some homework and see how things are in different regions. And some places that I've traveled and worked. For example, I did my doctorate in a country that was having a civil war when I was there, in ex-Yugoslavia. And at the same time, on this island, which is mostly, let's say, 99% Dalmatians, like islander and coastal Croats. There was no real war happening on those islands. It hadn't really come there, and it wasn't coming there. Now on the adjacent mainland, there was plenty of stuff going on, and regionally, it was a bad time for different people, different ethnicities living in that area. I think if I take that as an example, you just need to do your homework and find out what's possible and what's not possible, and don't think that you have the right to travel through a region where it's part of my bucket list and I got to do it. If it's not the right time and not the right place, and showing up in your super shiny overland vehicle isn't really going to be appreciated, you know what, you're just going to have to just realize that and adjust accordingly. And I think that that's something that people have to take into account. I mean, before this trip, of course, I was on the U.S. State Department site. I was on British Foreign Office websites, all sorts of government level websites, trying to find out about areas in specifically Ethiopia, but also in northern Kenya and parts of Djibouti that might not be the best places to travel. Yeah, I mean, there were things that happened that kind of bummed me out. A couple years ago, I was able to go with my family over to Jordan, and I was really stoked that I could get back there after some decades of not being in that country. It was cool to, for example, go see Petra after I don't know, almost 30 years of not being over there in that country. Really great. But sometimes you just got to make sure that you're in the moment, because things happen. I mean, for example, there was nothing going on in Ecuador when I was there. And right now it's not really
A mess.
I'm sure there are places to go and in Ecuador. I mean, we drove through Ethiopia, which the State Department has listed as, it says it's a category 3, which is, reconsider travel to this country. I mean, they don't kind of paint it in some other way. It says reconsider travel to this country. But we did some homework. Scott did some homework. He was able to talk to a regional security officer out of the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi, and we were able to kind of focus on areas where it was safe and it was known to be safe, and roads that were known to be safe. And so obviously we had to take a little bit of the adventurer's gamble, but when you take in experience as well, like don't drive at night, drive on the known trucking routes, what to do at checkpoints, how to act, when you meet government officials kind of outside of a government capacity, or members of the military, stuff like that. Then you can kind of, obviously you have to work with your own comfort level. I appreciate that, and it's not for everybody. I could safely say 30 years ago, a lot of what I just did last month in Africa, I would have just gone for it, but without the experience. And now I feel like I have more experience in those situations and in those countries where I'm more comfortable. I have a different threshold as far as, oh wait, the hackles go up or whatever. Hair on my neck stands up. It takes a little bit more now than it did, 30, 40 years ago. And but anyway, Phil, yeah, there's some places where I'd love to visit on the planet, and I don't know if I'm going to get to them, but I'm hoping that people get their act together and let people go in and experience their resources and their culture. Human culture is so diverse across our planet, and I mean, I know that Michael, you have a quote from Anthony Bourdain, on your webpage, and man, I could just drive around and eat, and just focus on that. Just, I mean, that's just reflecting fellow humans and what they do and how they prepare food, and I think that's what I still marvel at when I travel around and appreciate. And I don't try and push like where I'm from and what I do on people. I want them to, bring me your food. How do you don't use silverware? Okay, cool. Show me what I got to do. All right. Let me try it out. You guys wear these clothes or you wear that thing. All right, cool. Let me check it, and, anyway, Phil, I don't know if I skirted around that question, I don't want to call any countries or people out, but I wish people would come together a little bit more, and share our diverse yet universal backgrounds on this fine planet. Because as far as I know, there aren't humans on any other planets for sure, and it's not easy to, if we even want to go there, to hang out. And we got a cool setup here on Earth, and I think people need to square up when they can, so that we can go overlanding.
Right.
Man, to that.
Yeah.
So, what were the highlights of this trip to Africa from an archaeologist standpoint? Or if there weren't any?
Oh yeah. There's always stuff always comes up, Phil. I mean, for me personally, I was really into going to the Ethiopian National Museum and seeing Lucy, well, or at least as far as we're told, the replicas of the bones. They'd made casts and stuff like that. I'm not in disagreement that probably for different reasons. I don't think somebody's going to try and steal a piece of Lucy's tibia or part of her femur or something like that. But things happen, fires happen, and I appreciate the fact that they're not just going to have it out in the open. But that was really cool, because that's something that, at least as a student of archaeology, where I went to school, we all had to study, the human origins, and just to go to one of the premier museums where this stuff is on display, and also where the exhibits themselves have examples cast, and in some cases real, of different crania and the history of human evolution in Africa and then elsewhere too. And I was really impressed with the National Museum there. Their exhibits were up to date. This is coming from an archaeologist, kind of looking at how they had everything displayed and the descriptions that they had. It wasn't like you're looking at something from like the late 1980s still. They had updated things along the way. So that was really cool. And then I would say that on a personal level, the other highlights were visiting some native communities, specifically a couple of villages that are recognized by UNESCO as World Cultural Heritage sites, where it's not because it's like an archaeological site, like a find or an obelisk sticking up or an old church or something like that, but it's a group of fellow humans that have been recognized for their importance and their contribution to humankind, and the fact that they're still doing what they're doing, and I think that's cool. There are a lot of these places where you'll see the kids wearing the t-shirts, and that's as a footnote, I always look for a kid that has a t-shirt that'll say something like Surf San Diego or La Jolla Shores, or it's in the same category as be in the middle of nowhere. You'll always see a Toyota Corolla. Yep. I don't know what that you could be. It is what it is. It's like, maybe that's evidence that there are aliens on this planet. But you'll be like with your adventure truck, Unimog or whatever you're driving, and you'll be in the middle of nowhere thinking that you're really cool, and your friends have Land Cruisers and everything like that, and then some guys will go driving by, 6 people up in a Toyota Corolla.
Yep. Happens every time.
Happens every time. And I don't know what that is, but in any case, Phil, I think visiting those villages really, there's an importance for me too on the personal level, because I get to connect with fellow humans that can inform me about the fact that they're not running around with the mobile phone. They're not running around worrying about Wi-Fi as part of what drives their daily lives. And I learn from that. They're getting by maybe in a traditional way that's hundreds, if not thousands of years old. I learn from that. I learn lessons from that. I take away. I appreciate my life more when I see that. I'm obviously there are advances that happen along the way. I don't get me wrong. I don't have a problem if some village has a little solar panel, that's generating electricity so they can get water out of a well. I think that's great. But I think those were some of the highlights, of this trip, visiting some of these native villages and going in there. And of course, I let Scott lead the way when we were offered in a couple of these places, sort of like their native beer, sort of brew or beer. I let him drink that stuff first, just to kind of see how that would go. That was always, that's kind of fun. Eating some of the native food. I have to say, especially in Ethiopia, where their food is just insane. It's killer. I mean, I couldn't get enough of it when I was there, and now it's still stuck in my brain. I try to describe it to people. Obviously, I had been to an Ethiopian restaurant or two, down in LA or up in San Francisco, but it's not the same as when you're there, and I think that's just so unique. And I try and pull that stuff away from these trips as well, and pass the word on, through different kind of fora like this, and writing.
Well,
And
I want to take advantage of having a true expert on here right now. I don't know if you keep up with the news internationally or nationally about national parks and things like that,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I know especially like in places like Utah,
Hmm.
routinely artifacts are found, um, and there are people who destroy those artifacts.
Yep, yep.
My question is, for a person who cares, what is the proper etiquette for travelers when they discover a potential artifact or a potential site or location?
That's a good question, Phil. And it's a complicated answer, but to give you and I've even taught classes at the university level just about this. It kind of depends on where you are. It depends on the regulatory environment where you are. So, for example, different states have different cultural resources laws. Different countries have different laws that in some cases are enforced and in other cases aren't. And I know from working just in the California area alone that different municipalities, different cities, for example, different counties have different regulations. Most of them in the US are fairly consistent. So it's not like, I could go dig up some human remains from a Native American cemetery here in California, but in some other state, it's okay to do that. Um, but there are variances, and but to answer your question, I think one of the things that's come through the ranks, it's hard to put your finger on it and it's hard to describe it, but over the years, archaeology, started out back in the day. When I say back in the day, let's say in the 1800s, when it was really like antiquarians and enthusiasts. They were surely male, they were surely rich, they were frequently Caucasian, they were frequently European, would go places and find things. And I mean, they would do a lot of research. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, they obviously had to put some background time in trying to figure out, and this is all pre-internet. It wasn't just like you could type in some location and go, like Howard Carter, for example. You couldn't just sort of roll on into Egypt and do what you want. But at the same time, over the years, that transformed into a scientific and academic endeavor that is, and along the way, backed by laws and ordinances and regulations that protect those resources, because cultural resources are finite. So for example, you go into some archaeological site in the Four Corners and you find, I don't know, you decide to start digging and you dig up a couple pots and, let's say a Native American burial. Well, it's not like there's an infinite supply of that. And that's frequently what the regulations are addressing. And they're also addressing stuff that's not just archaeological. It's more of the cultural heritage from the communities that are still alive. So, you can see that it's a complicated issue and a complicated answer. But what I tell people is that, one, I always say, hey, look, if you show up at the Parthenon and you start poking around in Athens and you're like, oh man, check out that piece of pottery. I'll take just one. I'll bring it back. I'm going to put it on my mantelpiece. I could tell you right now, if 1,000 people said the same thing, which they probably have over the years, all of a sudden you're going to have nothing on the surface of this archaeological site, and you're also taking it out of context. So that piece of pottery doesn't mean anything. It's not around its friends. It's not around, it's not around to be studied by anybody. It's just there it is. And so I tell people to just leave everything where you found it. It's cool to map it. It's even cool to do, amateur sleuthing and maybe get permission from a local university, get some grad students to go back out with you and explore something. That's all possible. I'm obviously I'm not addressing people that are looting and things like this, or, selling antiquities and other items on the world market, for profit, because that's just not cool. But what we're talking about here, Phil, is, for example, somebody finds something out, when they're out there traveling around, and what should they do with it? I think it's okay to appreciate it where it is and leave it where it is, and especially these days, you can photograph stuff. You can make your cool little Instagram video if you want. Hey, check this out. We found this piece of pottery, really cool. It's right underneath this cliff dwelling, and, here we are. This is what's going on. Obviously, as soon as you start to give away locational information, just like everyone's secret hideouts in Baja and where to go camping, then other people are going to find it. So that's a slippery slope too. It's multifaceted, Phil. And, but that's kind of how I approach it with people. Don't just give away the location, appreciate it for what it is and leave it where it is. And pursue it if you want. I mean, plenty of amateurs have come back with professional archaeologists and then even excelled beyond the professional historians and archaeologists in some cases, sleuthing. They end up geeking more than the geeks on something, and that's cool. But when you do it in that way, that means that fellow humans can learn about it. I can read about it. I can go to a museum and appreciate it. I can have, the finds that were recovered in a scientific manner on exhibit in a local museum, where I can go see that pot that somebody found, instead of it just being kind of parked in somebody's house, only for them to appreciate. And then surely what happens, they pass away and they don't tell everybody really where it came from and what it was. And then you have some kids with this thing on the mantelpiece and they don't really know. And, at that moment, and this is how it happens. And people come up with their own really cute excuses and stories and stuff. But it is what it is. And this is how it happens. And the sentimental part of it is totally lost. The context is lost. And then there it is. It's just another piece of pottery on a mantelpiece.
So, from what you know and have experienced as an archaeologist, evolution or creation?
Oh, dang, Phil, you're going big. Big.
I got a scientist here.
Yeah. Well, just by that statement alone, you know what my response is going to be. I definitely believe in evolution, not just of the human species, but of all species, over time. But I'm going to throw something out there. When I was a corporate guy, we had a field biologist who was quite religious in the Western religion sense. And so I'm the guy, in the lunchroom where I'm the guy that said, hey, so how do you square up with this? Because you're a field biologist. And obviously, the whole Darwinian evolution and everything like that, that's gonna play out in your education over the years as an undergrad and surely as a grad student, and it can't be avoided. And this is what she said, that it's not really clear how, if God created everything in a certain amount of time, that time wasn't really defined. And so she was okay with things being millions of years old. It didn't affect her personally. It didn't affect her view of her religion, or the fact that she didn't feel like she was going against, creationism. She just defined the creation period of time in a greater time. And I thought that was kind of cool, because that allowed her to kind of square up what she wanted to study with her religion. But I do think that those are overall, those are conversations that need to have in totally separate contexts. But obviously for me, as a scientist of past human culture, I like to follow the evolutionary train of thought. Of course, like the first thing that was suggested when we were going to go to Ecuador was I had to go to the Galapagos. Without a doubt, I had to go to the Galapagos, and just kind of see everything that Charles Darwin saw out there and experience it all. And it's a mind-blowing experience out there. That's for sure. It's something that I would recommend to anyone. Get down to Ecuador, do some photos at the equator, and then head out to the Galapagos and check it out. So yeah, I think maybe, I don't know if I skirted that question, Phil. I know
that was an excellent answer.
People have, they definitely have their feet in one camp or the other, usually on that subject. And I'm open. I don't mind hearing from people about the other side. I think that's great. That's one of the great things, especially about being in the country that we're in, is you can have your own opinion and your own thought. And I like that. I've obviously been to places where you're not allowed to think freely, or to freak theely, right? Just kidding. Anyway, so yeah, that's a good question, Phil. And hopefully I answered it, in as vague as manner as possible, without,
Okay, I'm gonna give you
shirking
something.
it.
I'm gonna give you something simple now.
All right.
We talked. I know you like toys, you like gear. So in the last 12 months, what has been your best investment in gear and why?
Okay. That's a good question. Overall, I wouldn't say that I'm a gear guy. I'm totally into that, like, buy it once. If it's expensive, but it's a good product, it's cool. I don't like to buy tools, for example, that suck, and then after using the ratchet 3 times, it's going to spin. And what's the point of that? I don't get that. So I've certainly tried some gear recently. Trying to think of something I've purchased. I've tried out some field gear for, obviously as the archaeology senior editor for the Overland Journal. I like Terrain 365 knives that they have. I've had the good fortune of testing one of them out. We'll be publishing some fun stuff on it, but I've taken it and soaked it in some of the nastiest water that our planet cranks out. One of them was in there. Here, I'll show you, Phil. Here, hold on a second. Here's one of them. It's made with a collaboration with Patrick Ma from Prometheus Design Works and Michael Vagnino from Terrain 365. He's a knife maker, mastersmith, and it's pretty cool. Like I said, I've had this thing in probably the most inhospitable locations on the planet as far as water goes, and it definitely doesn't rust. It keeps a really nice edge. It's got a cool price point. So anyway, sounds like I'm promoting
What was the
it.
name
I
of the
just
metal again?
They call it Terravantium. Yeah, Terravantium. That's like a uh, proprietary metal. I'm sure it's like a dendritic cobalt. I'm sure it's just like the percentage. That's not my specialty as far as knowing exactly, how they patented it and stuff like that. But
And so far, where have you been with this knife?
uh, the Dead Sea. Well, I've been all over the place with it actually, but I wore it in my pants in the Dead Sea in a bathing suit, caked it in mud, let it dry out, didn't rust. Wore it snorkeling in the Red Sea, which just has the saline content really of the rest of the world's oceans. And then I also just less than about a month ago, dunked it in Lake Assal in Djibouti, which has depending on which sources you look at, the highest saline content of any lake, in the world. It's also the lowest point in Africa. So I dunked it in the water there and just let it dry on its own in the back of the Grenadier. And cool piece of kit. Cool piece of kit. I'm just testing it. I didn't buy it, but I like that. Phil, to answer your question about any gear that I purchased, well, I did have to purchase another titanium cup. I think I've run over, I don't know how many of them. And so I purchased another one of those, like the camping ones. I don't know why I tend to put them, like when I'm in my van, I put them on the wheel or the tire,
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah. I saved the ones that I've crushed, by the way. I don't know. It's just like a badge of courage. I don't know what.
So we're going to get you out of here, but I got just a couple of more questions for you, if that's all right.
All good. Yeah, all good.
Okay. So we asked everybody this. What's your favorite type of trail to wheel? Dirt, what type of landscapes do you like to drive through?
I like fire trail, kind of single tracks that are in the mountains. I'm not sure if I would prefer that over something out in the desert. But those are my two kind of like favorite, let's say, zones to transit in a vehicle. Meaning like something that has 4+ wheels on it. I find that I see things much differently when I'm on a motorcycle. Maybe it's the concentration part, I'm sure, as you know, Michael.
Oh, yeah.
So people will be ahead of us driving or whatever. Hey man, did you see that stuff? No, I don't know what you're talking about, man. But yeah, those are kind of like the zones that I know that covers a lot of our planet, but those are kind of like the different zones that I like to transit in a four-wheel vehicle. Yeah, those are my faves. Also, something to think about, Phil, on road trips, and I think it's because people in the vehicle are not looking at each other, but they're staring out at the environment. People on road trips talk about things that they might not talk about if they were sitting at the same table staring at each other. It's one of those things that it's hard to describe, but it. You end up talking about cool things with people on road trips, and I'm positive that it's because you're looking forward and you're in proximity with each other. So there's that sort of level of intimacy, if you will, as far as conversation. But you're not staring at each other's eyes, so you kind of say things that maybe you wouldn't normally say if you were just sitting right across from each other. And I like that part of road trips.
Well, Bryon, I want to thank you for spending so much time with us and talking with us. This has been fun. It's been educational. It's been philosophical. How does someone find you on social media?
Well, I don't dive too deep on that. I'm on Instagram, Byron Bass, BrYonBass, and And then you can also see stuff that I publish through the Overland Journal and also Expedition Portal. And that's the best way to track me down and see what I'm up to. I post when I can, and I have a good time doing it. I get focused on like just doing it and not telling people that I'm doing it, but I still realize that there's some cool stuff that I come across and I like sharing it. And I think that's, why I like, certain platforms like Instagram and stuff like that. So that's how I can be tracked down.
Okay. And folks, I've already got him to commit. He's going to be coming back. We're in the works and planning on talking about some serious stuff. So stay tuned for that. Mike, is there anything you want to say?
I'm in agreement. Just get out and do it. That's the number one thing I always say. Just do it.
I love that. Amen. Without a doubt.
Any last words, Bryon?
No, I won't have any words of wisdom at the end here, but I'll see you next time. I look forward to it. It's going to be great.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. You know what I'm going to say. Stay safe, tread lightly, and hopefully we'll see you here or on a trail soon.
You have been listening to Waypoint Overland's Random Waypoints. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.